So prep time is over. We're gonna be starting the debate soon. Before that, of course, as a gentle reminder to all the observers, to keep the decorum, don't speak too loud, like probably silence your phone, whatever. Just don't make noises that might disturb the debate. Yep, and I guess first of all, I'm Justin. I'm gonna be the chair. I'm gonna be judging alongside a panel of 5. We can start by the panel introduction, starting from the order in the tab, which is Icha.
Hi everyone, Icha from Universitas Mataram as one of the panelists. Best of luck.
Hi guys, my name is Razik Otman Ali from Universitas Diponegoro as a panelist. Best of luck.
Hi everyone, my name is Jen Sanjaya from Parahyangan Catholic University. All good lucks to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Chia. I'm from Sanata Dharma. Best of luck for all teams.
Great, thank you. Is the recording already on? Is it going to be recorded? Yeah. All right, great. So it's recorded. So for all the speakers, just maintain, like, pay attention to equity. Don't make remarks that might not be suitable for public consumption. Yep, welcome to open quarters of NUDC 2024. Congratulations everyone for making it this far. Before we start, just a couple of general reminders. POIs are heavily encouraged for engagements. Please do so, take an offer. Maximum speaking time is 7:15. Beyond that, we will not be writing anything. So adjust your speech accordingly. Without further ado, calling upon PM.
Is there any timer that I could use? Oh yeah. Before I start, trigger warning, my talk about sensitive content and everything I say in this debate is only for debate purposes, does not represent my political point of view in any sort of way. When bad policy is made, we must repeal it. And that is exactly what the opening government is trying to pursue in this debate. 3 points of setup before I move on to my speech. Firstly, what does the deal look like? It is really a piece of a big diplomacy that is done by both sides, where everyone can get what they really want. Iran wants to trade with the big 5 countries, for example, and Germany, and US wanting this Iran development policy to stop to begin with. And the agreement is working exactly because of the inspection and the necessity for Iran to maintain those deals. However, it is broken single-handedly by Donald Trump maverick foreign policy with the sanction put in place not only on trade but also banning Iranian people to come to United States, for example. And second, our stance is that US should reinstate and return to this JCPOA to begin with, and those sanctions, and bring the economic benefit back to begin with. Thirdly, just the preemption. Probably opposition will say about, oh, Iran will not comply if we return to the deal. Will they comply? I believe that they will, because 3 things. One, they have done it before because, yeah, there is the inspection to begin with. And secondly, the accountability is very public to begin with to ensure that there is a public check and balances. And thirdly, Iran really need the economic development from this to distract them from the socio-economic unrest that are happening in status quo, with the Amasa Amini protests happening and the Ibrahim Raisi death, for example. They need some sort of distraction to begin with, and this is what they look like. 3 points of case. Firstly, on the point of efficacy, treaty breaking is not really going to be effective to begin with for the US purposes. This is true for 3 reasons. Firstly, Iran still have alternative with other countries such as developing ones like Indonesia and India, or powerhouse countries like China and Russia. They can still trade to begin with. But secondly, there is a vested interest by China and Russia to empower Iran to create new axis of evil to ensure that they can counterbalance the US and whatnot. not. But thirdly, even if the efficacy is still working, the sanction only harms the people, because the people who are impacted the most are the ones in trade and people who are seeking education in the United States. The leaders who are making decisions on this nuclear development policy will not affected by anything. This is important because two reasons. One, sanction can only work if everyone is in, and I already proved to you that one, they are not, and secondly, therefore there is no punishment to begin with if you are breaking this policy. And secondly, exactly if this harms the people the most, the extremism from the people is going to be likelier. They are going to see United States as some sort of evil to ensure that they are able to push for the government for a more maverick policy to ensure that the US can truly be dead. The comparative that we are offering in our side is that if the stick in diplomacy doesn't work, then we provide the carrot it is. This is important because exactly when more stuff coming in, there is going to be more supply to begin with, and therefore this stuff is going to be cheaper. The people won't be affected to begin with. And secondly, there is a chance for Iranian people to feel liberated, to open with the liberal policies of the Western democracy, that are able to check and balance their government to begin with by working or studying in the US. And thirdly, they are able to shift the perspective of the people in gray area. Maybe US isn't really that evil to begin with, and therefore the relations will be better off. But secondly, this breaking of policy increase the undue escalation that are happening in status quo. This is bad for two reasons. Firstly, the current context of the world instability right now. We have two major conflicts in Israel and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia to begin with. We do not need another one. However, it is exactly what is going on with the status quo right now. Secondly, it pushed Iran into forming a new axis of evil with Russia, China, and North Korea to begin with. The autocratic, anti-democratic alliance seeking sympathy from the global South countries to begin with the global South countries already have a negative point of view on the US, and add that to Iran, and add that to the story of Iran their treaties broken to begin with, making US seem untrustworthy. Actually, there is a three reason. Now, the third reason, it leads to the possibility of US getting blamed for conspiracies, that instability inside the country, such as the death of Ibrahim Raisi, for example. Exactly because of this, it pains US as having vested interest in the downfall of Iran, reducing the bad stability in and of itself, and increasing the risk of the war in long term, which are feeding by the false information that are compounded by the US incorporation in and of itself. This is important because US, for all their sins, is still the sponsor of democracy and freedom. You look at Ukraine, for example. You look at NATO. Look at East Asia, for example. Therefore, you must maintain the credibility and the stability of US itself and the world order that are established by the United States. There is a reason there is no world war in 80 years, and it is because the current world order that is established by the United States in and of itself, we must maintain it. We must not give the chance for the new axis of evil to take sympathy from the global South countries by capitalizing this, for example. But before that, before 6, any points? No? Cool. Thirdly, Trump's policy must not be maintained. This policy is solely product of Trump policy, and Donald Trump is the single biggest threat of the world peace and status quo. Why is this true? One, his brand of populism inspired demagogues worldwide, from India, for example, to Philippines and other Southeast Asia countries, which I refuse to mention, for example. Secondly, it is feeding the xenophobia by his policy of hate speech, for example, and blatant protectionism, not only on trade but also in immigration. Thirdly, it is simply a bad foreign policy. Not only the JCPOA pull out, but also you have the ban on Muslims coming to the United States, for example. You have to deal with the pro-Palestine state to deal with Israel, weakening the ties between Palestine and Arabian countries in and of itself. Therefore, Trump's policy should not be maintained, and exactly not returning to JCPOA is validating his foreign policy to begin with, adding the credibility to the man and the brand of policy itself. US must pull out of this for a simple reason that Trump is running for re-election this year. Any sort of policies that still maintain is validating his perspective, and exactly because of those, we cannot afford to have this continue. We must return back.
Thank you. Hello?
Kanan ya? Oke. Our team identity is clear. We allow nuclear development because that's not the most urgent thing to do as US, because they prefer to give economic sanctions because that will be more effective contradicting to Iran, right? Now first, what is lacking in OG? I think OG only explains too much to the extent that what is the worst case scenario and what will Iran do in the status quo. But first you have to further prove why JCPOA is going to be effective in the status quo with the current political climate right now, right? Understand that Iran is now mourning of the death of its president and foreign minister because of their death, right? Further adding to the political instability and the prejudice towards the US because of that belief that has been thrown in generations that Iran and US has always been in tension, right? Understand that if you want to reinstate this JCPOA as USA, this will further worsen the political tension with the US and the Middle East, right? Now, our reframing is clear. Iran hasn't been that aggressive right now compared to the past because there are already sanctions and there are already international government body limiting their access as well as their movements, right? OG's biggest concern is about citizens, right? Let's flip this. When there's further political tension, that will actually further worsen the connection and as well as the exchange, as well as the agreement, as well as everything that you want to do between US and Iran, right? Further, in your case, there's going to be a high possibility that engaging in human conflict is going to be sped up, right? So first, let's check why is JCPOA is effective in 2015 but hasn't been continued in 2018, right? America has the interest to continue trading with Iran because of the demand for oil. You even said so that Iran has the bargaining power too because of their oil power, right? However, since 2018, with the rise of electric vehicles being pressured to enter the economy market, the US had little to no interest trading with Iran because there's been other opportunities and other possibilities, right, to trade other than Iran, right? We see that a lot of American companies like Tesla have been pushing for more EV with partnerships in the Southeast Asia, right? This proves that Iran has now lacking bargaining power in the status quo, which is why US has no urgency at all to reinstate with the JCPOA. If government wants to come with the concern that with the expense of this, there will be nuclear development, understand that US is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, right? If Iran is going to be irrational and suddenly they want to engage in human conflict, the UN can make a decision that either it's going to be veto or there's going to be protection towards the innocent citizens if that's what you're concerned with, right? But let's still engage in your worst case scenario. We believe that even with the rapid development of nuclear, Iran won't still do anything irrational to the point that there will be war. Even if there will, we believe that implementing economic sanctions is actually a better mechanism to check and balance and keep in check Iran, right? Understand in the context slide, you want JCPOA to be reinstated. It stated that you have to, there is going to be conduction in inspections, right? Understand that the members include US and Russia and China, right? Understand the political tension first with US, Russia, and China. Literally, you use the examples of Palestine and Israel, knowing that there are beliefs that it was actually being forced by the US Army or maybe because it was conducted by another section of US, right? Understand that even with now Iran, even though they stated that they want to protect Palestine, they still couldn't do it. Why? Because they are still afraid of US. This further proves that US is still strong enough without the reinstation of JCPOA, right? Even with the limitations of economic sanctions, right? Yes.
Do we want every country to have nuclear weapon now?
Okay, if you want to focus about nuclear development, I think that means you want to sanction maybe North Korea, maybe you want to sanction China, maybe you want to further sanction other countries who have nuclear development, right? Understand that nuclear development is not a big worry back in like World War I and World War II. I think a lot of political people are understanding that if they want to go through that land or through that plot again, it's going to be detrimental to their state, to their entire country, right? Understand that you want to defend the citizens. In your side, it's going to be clearly worse, right? You're going to worsen the political tension because you want to reinstate the JCPOA. Understand, I'm going to prove why then economic sanctions is much more effective to keep in check in Iran, right? Most countries in the status quo are residing in using economic sanctions because it actually limits the agreements and political influence, right? For example, if Indonesia wants to have agreements with China, there is actually like sanctions from EU, maybe, for example, like saying that like, okay, maybe you can do certain trade, but we're going to limit several sanctions if you keep on doing this, if you're going to go up to that certain degree, right? Understand that a lot of countries personally reside on using economic sanctions because that is actually more effective to keep in check the countries so they wouldn't do anything irrational, right? In your side, JCPOA wouldn't put economic sanctions. They would only focus on the curb of nuclear development program. Your burden is to prove why then nuclear development is so detrimental. If you cannot prove that war is not likely going to happen, then what's the whole point of creating or reliving the organization to focus only a specific program where you can further sanction them with economic sanctions, right? Economic sanctions clearly, even though yes, there's going to be trade limitations where maybe Iran people, businessmen, they couldn't do trade sanctions with other countries, but understand at the very least it's going to be keep in check and it's actually much more beneficial. It doesn't impact or harmfully endanger the citizens that are innocent because of your rational decision that you want to initiate JCPOA just because of your selfishness that you want to keep Iran and you don't want them to have nuclear development, but you want your own nuclear development, right? So what have we proved, right? We believe that we have flipped their actor analysis because they said that their vulnerable actors are citizens. We have further proved that in your side it's going to be much more worse because there's going to be political conflict and even human conflict in your side because it's going to worsen the engagement that has been improving in the last years with US, Russia, China, and America, right? And we have further proven that economic sanctions is much more effective keeping it because it actually limits the agreements and political influence coming from other countries that are contradicting to Iran. We are proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you. DPM.
Audible? Two trigger warnings. Number one, contain sensitive contents. Number two, when we're talking about conflict, definitely we're talking about the life of individuals. So yeah, just to make sure that everyone's prepared. So yeah. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The country as big as Iran will never care about economic sanctions. This is the points that stand exclusively because sanctioning Iran economically will not work, based on several reasons. One, simply because they do not care if their own countries are rich or economically poor. We have seen a lot of people starving, living outside when they do not have a place so-called as a home, when they constantly impose by a feeling that they cannot survive for tomorrow. This is already there even before Trump imposed the economic sanctions, because the fast of Iran budget allocations were not made by empowering economics on their side, but rather for aiming for the superiority in military sectors, at least by imposing three important approaches. The first thing is sending proxy militaries and weaponaries to conflicted areas such as Syria and Yemen. Shia dictator figure like Bashar al-Assad to make sure that they can stay in power to combat the Sunni individuals. But secondly, buying and employing more armies such as Palestinian Islamic Jihad to combat famous and powerful figures Sunni in Palestine like Hamas. But thirdly, constantly hijack minerals and resources from areas that are left behind because of wars and conflict to develop their nuclear to make it far more powerful and far more destructive. All of this suggests that sanctions were never effective because all the powers of Iran that they never engaged, that Jason already explains, already concentrated upon one supreme leader, which is Ali Khamenei, by his vision to promote superiority. This figure cannot be easily toppled down because he had all of the access of state resources, and there is no democracy, particularly in Iran in the first place, because you obviously cannot choose politicians because it is predicated based on theocracy. Therefore, there is no probably things such as elections and so on. But also thirdly, his power is incredibly huge to the points where he oftentimes utilized the hatred from Shia people to Sunni individuals. The cases such as generational trauma as a result of Peninsula conflict or Six-Day War that are still fresh in people's perspective. Therefore, the end of economic sanctions is still unclear in the side of oppositions. So I assume this is going to be a templatic end and output, which is toppling down these leaders. I would argue that if you want to toppling down these really, really powerful individuals, not only the costs are incredibly huge because it must be done throughout bloody revolution that is very, very uncertain whether it can be successful or not, but also secondly, the process of US help these individuals to intervene to kill Saddam Hussein in Iraq will not going to be that easy because Iran got nuclear. Therefore, US will ultimately consider that there is probably the mutual assured destructions that will appear whenever these two countries eventually conflicting each other. And I'll say this, Iran nuclear development, whenever it is still ongoing, like by questions by LO, is still extremely harmful. Because I would argue when we talk about nuclear research and nuclear developments, it is not only talking about the big boy like nuclear entirely, but also the derivative products from that nuclear research. What does this look like? Grenade, explosion, chemical substances that be sold to ISIS because Iran do not have any option of survivability anymore. This is the main reasons why US has an initial incentive to combat the terrorists in the first place. Why? Because number one, these terrorists eventually threaten their ally, disturb their policy, and disturb their process of trading because of they probably threaten countries like Saudi Arabia, which is the main sources of oil and gas from targeted to the US in the first place. But secondly, I think it's also possessed insecurity to the vast majority of people in US. What does this look like? This looks like the 9/11 case. 9/11 case that always associated with Middle East because there are certain pain and trauma that are constantly growing. Therefore, we must protect these individuals and therefore combating terrorists matter because the vast majority of weapons that terrorists like ISIS and all the separatisms coming from Shia, who oftentimes did the proxy conflicts, are mainly coming from Iran because Iran do not have any options that they could garner because they do not have any alternative to garner revenues on their side of the house. This is where our comparative matter because prohibited nuclear development, reducing the insecurity that world feel and also US individuals and society eventually feel because there are a lot of narrative like fear-mongering from famous media such as Al Jazeera who consider that developing nuclear is incredibly harmful, is incredibly scary. Therefore, it's make people have the rational decisions on our side of the house and at least they can feel safe. But secondly, it also reduces the power of weaponry industries that Middle East eventually has because Iran has because Iran nuclear weapon is the source of main destructions that are allowed the derivative product of nuclear research to be sold by many things. Therefore, when you limited this option to develop this in the first place, Iran eventually has another option to the economic survivability. This is why I will co-opt all the benefits because if their benefit is just selling another industry like oil and gas, then it will work better in our side of the house because now when the economic sanctions are lifted, then obviously these industries can functionize eventually well because they can get the target, because they can get the market targets or market segment that they want to approach. EU countries or US countries in the first place only could happen if you normalize trade with Iran by first uplifting the economic sanctions. Only if economic sanctions are not existing anymore. Therefore, all characterizations that say Iran is not that irrational is actually supporting our case. case, because this shows to you that Iran do not have any incentive to prolong the nuclear development. They just prolong the nuclear development because they do not have any safety net that they could garner on our side of the house. Therefore, when JCPOA exists, Iran, US, and global community as well will also benefit from this. And here's where all the Jason explanations matter, based on 3 important reasons, and this is going to weigh us exclusively against any extension that closing one Iran. Because the first thing is, currently the image from US were incredibly bad because of things such as US rejected Palestine independency and so on. When these sanctions constantly imposed on the other side of the house, then it's going to make a certain narrative that US is anti-life, anti-establishment, and so on, that will perpetuate even more worse image targeted to the US in the first place. Therefore, what we are proving under our side of the house is that when the economic sanctions mainly target the individuals on the ground and not the elites, because elites are unlikely to be impacted by this narrative, what we should do is uplifting this policy, because we can't actually protect these individuals. We can't actually fix the image that US is just interventionist and so on by making sure that there is a hope for these individuals to live by uplifting the economic sanctions so that they can survive. But secondly, I feel like it is also good for Iran, because the vast majority of Sunni countries already hated Iran in the first place, because they consider them as something that is extremist, because they always constantly import the vast majority of they constantly export the vast majority of weapons that create even more worse conflict in the Middle East. But now, when all of these are not happening, then at least the Iran can eventually manifest a certain organic changes, trying to normalize the negotiations process or the relations between the Middle East countries in the first place. What does this look like? This looks like trying to stop or at least reduce the amounts of weapons imported to the separatism groups and so on. Therefore, there is an initial incentive of organic change that manifests happen under our house that is also exclusive for Iran. But also thirdly, this is also better for US people in general, because the vast majority of US people hate Donald Trump, as what Jason explained. They are traumatic because of the experiences such as anti-immigrant policy and so on. When you actually left the Donald Trump policy with no trace at all under our side of the house, this is where people can feel secure and people can live happily ever after.
Thank you. Diallo.
Let me arrange my paper. Trigger warning, I will be talking a lot about sensitive issues, just for the purpose of the debate. How am I supposed to use this?
Reset kiri, mulai kanan, stop kanan.
I cannot use it.
Reset, ini mulai, kalau POI ini, terus reset.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. OG's case is just a usual white superiority complex that somehow US is the liberal or the force of democracy, right? Understand, Iran, regardless of this, we think that Iranian people are most likely very much Shia conservative in a sense that they want to comply to what Ali Khamenei say, not that feminists who march on the street. I think that's just a minuscule of people that we cannot protect in the end of the day, because understand, this is an IR policy motion. This is not domestic policy that somehow we can mix up about what Iran is doing to that protester, right? This is just an IR policy. That is to say, even if the harm is there in your side of the house, in a sense that somehow Joe Biden has to sit together with Ali Khamenei and will obviously giving harm for this protester that will see the US as somehow supposed to be their savior, but yeah, now the US also complicit towards their oppression, right? So their case cannot fly at all. So let's go to about OG then. Sanction is harmful, especially towards Iranian people. I think OG's case failed to dissect who are the Iran people that we are talking about, right? Because regardless it is harmful or not, we don't think it is the USA that really impactful towards Iran. In fact, it is the people of Iran economy is reliant on trade relation with China and Russia, especially in terms of agriculture, gold, mining, etc. But in fact, let me flip this. Which part of Iran's economy which actually hurt by the US sanction, right? We think that it is the oil industry, right? Precisely because it is the main economy, especially in the 2015, which owned by Iranian oil oligarchs, which by the way also funding Hamas in the current status quo. This is good for the if we don't reinstate it, I think that this is good for the stability of the world, because the JCPOA have gave a way to Iran to actually procure a lot and strengthen their military power in absence of nuclear, right? Understand the framing, because when we're talking about military, it's not just about nuclear, right? There are a lot of weapons which can also give a country to become much more powerful and create a much more bargaining power, especially in the Middle East, right? And increase its influence in the Middle East, which imposes a lot of harm, especially in the current status quo, where Middle East are very much in the power dynamics, especially what's happening in Israel, also with the Saudi Arabia and so on and so forth. In our side, we believe that this sanction is actually deterring Iran from procuring or increasing their nuclear program in the end of the day. But secondly, on the idea of Iran, China, Russia, US axis, that somehow it is imminent, right? Precisely that it is imminent, USA should not intervene or reinstate again, because once this plan is executed, it will make Iran's ally obviously uncomfortable to the point that they are going to threaten the US or in fact Iran to begin with. Because when we are talking about reinstatement, the process of international agreement is not just, yeah, I will reinstate it, but there will still be negotiation to begin with. Understand, with this kind of negotiation, obviously the articles of that particular agreement would not be the same, because we argue that there would be an involvement of China and also Russia in that particular agreement, right? Understand that this is 2024, where China has become a very strong power to the point that it is also dictating Iran in the end of the day. What's the picturization? We think that Iran would most likely to make sure that their ally is also joining, and to make sure that the economic sanction will also to the point where somehow it is going to curb the economic sanction that happens towards the China or towards the Russia, for example, right? Therefore, it's going to decrease US influence. Understand, we are debating in an actor motion in the sense that this is the United States of America. Understand, this is not as the United States of America, but at least we have to give the characterization as to why USA should comply to this particular reinstatement. But understand on Iran's progressivity, this is an IR motion. Understand, this is not a domestic policy. Regardless of this policy, Iran's domestic political climate will most likely to become conservative. Why? Ali Khamenei has a very strong support, the lifelong leader of Shia people, coming from the majority Shia people, there is the majority population of Iran. If they want to champion the minority, such as the liberal Iranian, I think they already get enough support coming from the social movements, such as feminism all around the world, for example, or visa for oppressed Iranian individuals, which still exists in the status quo, and it's not exclusive to the USA, even to the point of Canadian people accepting Iranian queer people, for example, right? Therefore, their benefit is not exclusive under their side of the house. But understand on the idea of Trump, in politics, there are no good or bad guys, right? It's all about interest coming of the country. You think that Iranian is doing terrorism, but what if the defense mechanism in the end of the day? We think that, yeah, Trump will most likely to become the president again, because there's so much pressure coming from Joe Biden. But understand, if you reinstate it, that we think that it is not going to be good for Joe Biden in the end of the day, precisely because we want to make sure that Iran would not be as strong. We as Joe Biden, we don't want to see somehow we are going to sit together with Ali Khamenei. I don't think that's bad for the US people in the end of the day. This is going to be my independence extension, right? One, on the situation of Iran, economically weaker due to this, it's precisely because it's hampering the oil company in the end of the day, due to economic and also the increase of conservative or political instability of Iran in the end of the day. Understand that the deals that happened in 2015 is happening when Iran's political situation is also still stable, because there's no war under Russia or Palestine, for example, right? It's still stable. Happening in, understand that it means that the USA, if they want to reinstate it, it means that they have to sit together with Russia, France, and etc., or to the point to Hamas leader, right? But not only that, we think that China will also come into the picture, precisely because Iran has established a very strong relationship with China. This is bad for USA, because it's going to weaker the US influence, especially in the global world in the end of the day, right? But understand, we want a power balance. We as USA will most likely to be strong as well, but not to the point where it become very strong, right? Understand, if the USA start to reinstate this, then President Joe Biden has to compromise with small monsters such as Khomeini and Xi Jinping. So engaging on the idea of Iran's domestic people and also the US, we think that it's going to play with the Iranian people emotion, because Iranian people emotion are not very rational in a sense that they see US as someone who are threatening to them. Understand, because of the death of that president, if somehow Iran are going to sit together, it's going to play towards the Iranian people emotion to the point that there might be some sort of backlash or revolution in a sense to actually backdrop, and somehow it's going to create a bad impact because Iran want to maintain its domestic policy as well, right? But what is our exclusivity? We have dissect what kind of motion that we are talking about, but precisely we have answered to the point where it is going to be create harmful even for the USA, because now the USA people also doesn't want to champion Iran in the end of the day, but how does the Iran people emotion, which are very important in the debate. Out of all that reason, very proud to be in this room.
Thank you. Member of Gulf.
Tes, oke. I think that in order for opposition to win, they need to answer why this Trump's decision is the correct one in the very first place, right? I think always talking about irrationality, but the same thing happens symmetrically because Trump was an economist and not a nationalist, not a politician. Exactly because we tell you that his action was backlashing the most interest of the US, which is maintaining the hegemony in the end of the day. The moment that we can prove to you that this kind of like hegemony is going to be, tempered with and, going to like, for example, like make US insecure is, I think we should win this debate, right? But secondly, I think irrationality is not equal to randomness, right? I think for you, debater, or that's stuck on a vacuum, Iran would not attack and utilizes the nuclear because there's UN, etc. But for Iran, after for far too long being exploited and by the US and a simple security dilemma that you need to take in account for example, you have to attack first in order for you to save yourself first. Exactly because either way, Iran is still going to be exploited by by the US under the side of the house. You say that you're also going to even make the sanction harder, therefore proposing Iran to even use the nuclear even more. But secondly, I think the motion is talking about agreement that involves not only US but also China and Russia. That this tells you that nuclear damages are massive. So the moment that it is being used, it is not only going to obviously damaging USA but also going to damage China as well. It's going to damage China's market, which is the most interest of China. The moment it's used, I think US is also going to be, the moment that US reinstate, it's going to we're going to like have more actors to supervise this kind of like Iran. So it's also going to give more security to China in the end of the day, right? But thirdly, I think this is, talking about reinstating. Their question about how US would want to sit together with China doesn't matter because they already did. They just want to reinstate in the very first place in current status quo, right? But let's talk about their, let's attack them at their core. OO tells you that economic sanction is much more coercive. I think that this is untrue because in order for you to develop destructive weapons, you don't need to have big economic ability. Exactly because terrorist group always succeed developing destructive weapons because they're not being inspected, therefore they can, freely develop it. Exactly because blood diamond exists or like other resources exist without being regulated and supervised. These Iran terrorists can always access that, right? This tells you two things. That A, by OO's own setup, that Irans already broken, their president is dying, for example, then most likely Irans already accustomed to employ, to unemployment and so on, therefore they resort to this kind of like developing nuclear to attack the US and just do vengeance. But secondly, inspection is urgent to prevent more victims to happen on their side. People are already unemployed on your side of the house because of the sanction, right? I think OO poses a bigger threat in the end of the day by giving threat of like not only that people are unemployed and cannot afford food, but they're now being threatened by the nuclear war. I think OO might be true that economic sanction is already working. This is why we're going to fill the gap of open government, right? Because the question is, what does US get out of sanctioning this? Just because the motion tells you that they should reinstate, you cannot fiat that they will. Because I think that, you know, by sanctioning, US will only get economic benefit. But US is already secure on economy anyway, right? Because US also creating trade war with China and also still thriving. But constant threat of nuclear weaponing is gambling on a position, because the moment they're still sanctioning, the development is still happening on the other side of the house, right? So the moment US is finally realized that they're under threat, they cannot face this. Just like, you know, the 9/11, they never know that terrorists actually exist because they never inspect this in the very first place. I think this kind of, like, you know, phenomenon is going to happen under the side of the house. Then how you should weigh, you know, CG? I think one, under timeline, that under the side of the house, they're also going to gamble this kind of like security of the US, also other, you know, countries. But secondly, on how this kind of like ideology, because we think that US need to maintain its hegemony, therefore they need to prove to you why sanctioning is going to maintain US hegemony. But I'm also talking about how, you know, it's actually increasing security dilemma, right? Because exactly the moment Trump broke the deal, Iran can just develop their nuclear weapon much more freely because there's no inspection anymore. This is bad and harmful under two structural reasons. One, because the most intuitive is because it's challenging US interests to be a hegemon to dominate. This is likely because Iran has been exploited a lot in the past, like their oil has been taken away, there's inspected a lot, therefore they need to, you know, develop this to do vengeance. This interest of wanting to maintain hegemony is run-winning because it overrides other US incentives, i.e. the interest to save people in opening government, you know, like, you know, to, you know, open more gate in immigrants in opening government, exactly because the US not that benevolent at the end of the day. Therefore, you need to have this kind of like much more realist approach to make the US will to reinstate in the end of the day. But secondly, it also affects more development of nuclear and create insecurity to other countries. Exactly because then the development of nuclear in a country is not only affecting US per se, but it's also going to affect other people, because the moment there is a probability of war, they have to always prepare. This is why North Korea, Russia, etc. is even more eager to develop their nuclear. Therefore, the probability of like nuclear war happen is very dangerous on their side of the house. But why then US has the responsibility to reinstate, right? Outside their interest of hegemony. One, because I think that being a hegemon is very crucial because you hold the most GDP and political influence in the world. This is a priority to OG's benefit of like saving the people. Exactly because the moment Iran does actually utilize their nuclear, the whole economic market is going to shatter. I think, like, you know, like it's going to, like, you know, like this kind of like, you know, development of like technology is even going to be more expensive, also harming other small countries because all is going to be even more pricey. And I think that, you know, US need to maintain their GDP for, you know, like their kind of like, you know, saving the people in government, in opening government to work. But secondly, I think OG sells a fake promise to you that US is not evil, but never tell you why they want to be good in the end of the day, right? I think nuclear damages is very irreversible. It is very damaging as like what their framing is, right? But I think US holds a human right value a lot. They promote democracy and so on, or otherwise they're going to be like scrutinized by other country. They're deemed to be inconsistent and so on. I think at the end of the day, US want to cater to this exactly because they want other countries to still believe and trust, you know, in their ideology. Because in the end of the day, in order for US to maintain its hegemony, is to also maintain trust from other countries to the US. In the end of the day, US have the interest to protect other countries as well, because this proves to you that protecting other countries also bring benefit, also bring domination to the US in itself of the us. Why then CG needs to win this debate? One, that we prove to you that this is not just about US that is able to be benevolent, because I don't think that they can. You have to use a realist approach that they cannot be benevolent, and you have to force US on how they would feel and how they would want to reinstate in the end of the day. One, they would want to reinstate because they want to maintain hegemony. I think this is round winning, because insofar that the hegemony is the most structural reason of the US existence in the very first place, I think US would want to maintain this, because otherwise the moment US is threatened to not being a hegemon anymore, then I think that the whole country, or like the whole world, is going to collapse, because the reason why UN exists on their side of the house, that they want to champion on how this kind of like, you know, mechanism of like scrutinizing Iran exists on their side of the house exists because the US exists. But the moment US is not the hegemon anymore, then the UN or like other mechanism that closing option want to bring is not going to exist. Therefore, we prove to you that this kind of protection happen on our side of the house. Propose.
Thank you. Member of Up.
Kayak mana nih main main?
Kalau ini mulai. set. Jadi ini mulai kode POI.
Depan kamera banget sih. Fix Kak. Banyak followernya.
Aku jadi kalah kode.
Bentar deh. A policy is only as strong as its power to assert itself towards the recipient, right? So far as we can prove to you that sanction is inherently more effective towards the issue that we are trying to talk about, and secondly, why the lowering development of nuclear weapons, whatever it is that it's either useless or harmful to the both hegemony and global security of the world, we should win this debate. So, a few framings first, right? We think the importance of this debate is to not talk about whether or not it is affecting towards US hegemony in a direct sense, right? We're going to argue with that, but first and foremost, we would like to analyze what is the actual incentive for these kinds of relations and policies to be actually made, right? Therefore, I'm going to try and bring two things in my arguments. Firstly, let's take a look at this from a game theory perspective, and secondly, what is the process of reinstation and how it's going to be probably bad, right? So, game theory, first layer, what is Iran's threat to the global world, right? We think in all cases, it's a foreseeable attack and retaliation from Iran to everyone, to US or whatever it is, right? So, it is a contention of power of nukes versus economy's sanction. If OG want to talk about fairness, we think it is an issue when they argue that the removal of a country's ability to defend itself is justified, right? But on terms of excess of evil or whatever it is, right? We think that it's at the same time, this is a prisoner's complex of other country to not enter into a relationship with Iran. At that point, they will not get any kind of benefit or whatsoever it is, right? But secondly, talk about the likelihood of retaliation, right? We think economy sanction and whether or not it works is a yes, right? Because frankly, they still need to trade on two ends, right? Either one, they're going to be a proxies of other countries, which is basically a lesser evil for these kinds of countries that they actually need economical benefit. But secondly, they're probably either going to take sides of Western or Southern hegemony, like they said, engage later on that. But regardless of effect to the people, right? It still affects development of the country. Whether be it nuclear, whether be it active development, a country will not stoop so low for them to not encourage the development. Therefore, they are still by default going to lower the effects of nukes, right? But secondly, on terms of stopping development, right? We think, well, by default, it's going to be lower, right? But consider the potential of terrorism and the chance of Iran including themselves inside of it. One, there is no likely analysis as to why, when you are such a poor country, you're going to by default go into terrorism and whatnot, right? Because again, international relationship still happens. At that point, it creates the chance of direct retaliation from the US. Therefore, probably Iran is not going to be so dumb as to follow that suit of direction, right? But thirdly, in terms of retaliation to other countries related in this agreement, right? We think this is basically on the idea of safety net from government side. We think this is basically more like a safety cages, right? They are not dumb to do conflict with superpower countries like US or Russia or China or whatever it is interested in this aspect, right? This stoppage of development of nuclear weapon does not do anything to affect this, because irregardless of this existence, they will not use it anyway. Therefore, what we need is to actively stop them from developing the only thing that they can in terms of risk and reward, which is their economy, and make sure that they don't do that on that angle, right? But more so than that, what is the economy versus nuke, and what is the relation to that in the context of Iran in relation, right? We didn't get this debate on US as world stability, such as OGs want to talk about, and Iran as the axis of evil's proxies, as they claim, right? We think this is a very basic game theory and clashes in three layers, right? Firstly, on terms of Iran to US, there is a very big gap of power in a way that Iran is probably not going to retaliate directly, one. But secondly, even if you were to give them economical sanction, it would probably mean that they have to follow suit whatever it is they need, right? But secondly, on terms of China and Russia, or China and China, Russia to either US and to either Iran, there is also at the same time a contention of whether or not they want to engage in quote-unquote proxy conflict with the US by taking away countries such as Iran into their fold, right? So therefore the debate becomes this, whether or not we believe Western hegemony as A, more powerful, B, when they are angered, or whatever the wording, they are much more dangerous, but C, are they basically much more fair or whatnot, right? We think all of this angle is debatable on the second argument, right? Which is on the process of reinstation, right? I want to talk about first things, on terms of the effects of US. This is one of the main thing that they argue about in terms of hegemony and whether or not Trump has a good reason to do it, right? We think there is a core relational of threat and understanding that Iran, left to be standing, regardless of nukes developing, is still a threat at the end of the day. But this is a power analysis, and this is the main contention towards the idea of Trump or whatever it is, right? On terms of hegemony first, it is not under threats of nukes. Simply put, it is affected positively for us as strongly as it is negatively for Iran, in a way that frankly, no matter how long you try and get Iran to develop their nukes, it's probably not going to be smart for them to retaliate or attack US in the very first day, at the very first place. But on counterfactual of that, this is the idea of strongly supporting the hegemony in a way that we are controlling a nation to the effect that it removes the threat, right? But the political issue also happens, right? Notice as to how this is a contention of liberal versus conservative or red states' ideas of whether or not they want to support another country, right? We think at the same time, they vilify Donald Trump, they at the same time ideate they support the idea of also taking away economical benefit from letting other countries develop nukes and whatnot, right? We think this is very bad. But secondly, notice on terms of power imbalances, right? We think there's a nuclear imbalance at the end of the day, regardless of development. This is an arms race at the end of the day. It's probably going to be US's games at the end of the day because they have been developing nukes so far and so much, to the extent that regardless of development, few more seconds, regardless of development, it will not happen to the benefit of Iran.
Say in 2027, Iranian people are dirt poor because of sanction and desperate, as Jose said, but Iran have nuclear bomb. When Iran inevitably strong-arm US to end sanction, or nuclear bomb will be launched to US and all their allies.
Order.
I'll answer that later. But two more layers on terms of proxies and analysis as to why they actually put the sanction in the very first place, right? So let's talk proxies first. Every country, basically in terms of this relation, want a piece of Iran, either A, the Western hegemony in controlling the Middle East, or the Southern hegemony of Russia and China wanting to control at the same time the middle piece of the board, right? We think at this end, it is not a debate on whether or not we give Iran to the better hegemony, but also understanding that it is probably going to be better for them to be able to it's better for them to let go and be as what they are, because probably when every country want a piece of Iran, it is going to create problems in a way that contention happens between countries and proxy wars and internal conflicts of countries happens, right? But what do they do it at the end of the day? We think it's basically a fear of terrorism and proxies terrorism, right? We think this is unjustified, and we think that this will not happen as long as we argue, as long as we agree that Iran will never beat the idea of hegemony. Thank you.
Thank you. Government Whip.
Trigger warning, sensitive, maybe sensitive parts will be in my debate, but will be in my speech, but it's not my intention to do that actually. It's just for the sake of the debate. I hope my voice clear, POI, except from opening. And then I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Why CG is winning? We analyze how state actually doing their behavior. They are not driven by morality and ethics, but by their realist interest, right? Which is saving and securing their own livelihood, because first, there is Iran that developed nuclear, and secondly, our main identity is explaining why we focusing on nuclear development is just in one country is threatening, and not just for Iran, but for the whole world. The audacity to attempt to develop nuclear in the very first place is very harmful because nuclear is like Afim already told you, is a massive diminishing power that will diminish all the world, and every country want to develop safety net to also will develop nuclear under their own country because there is a chance that Iran will launch this, for example. Okay, several engagement with CG before going on to my clash. CG come and say that they need to crush this Iran economic, therefore their nuclear will not be launched, and therefore we will be safe. First, they already have nothing to lose, ladies and gentlemen. Their president is already dead, and for example, death, and the economic is sanctioned and whatsoever. If you give more sanction that starve their society, they're even challenged to launch the nuclear because nothing to lose, right? This directly engaged to CO because if Al-Qaeda is willing and succeed with this directly engage with CO because if Al-Qaeda is willing and succeed in 9/11, then most likely they will do it again because they are tired of being controlled by US on their side. The moment they are always being sanctioned, the moment their society always starve. This is the reason why Iran will brave under their side because secondly, our identity prove more that our identity answering with our point that never been rebutted in this debate. If there is just one country that develop nuclear, it's not just for Iran, for example, but we also, like Russia and whatsoever, we also even develop their own nuclear. Even in Indonesia, there is university that now have nuclear major, ladies and gentlemen. This is exactly our identity in the initial, this is exactly our identity in the initial attempt of Iran to develop the nuclear, like how Russia pull out the agreement that, that prohibit every country to actually launch their nuclear is pulled out, right? This is exactly how the World War III will happen under the side of the house. It seems like a big burden, but I will explain to you. The whole opposition bench should explain why then Trump decisions to broke JCPOA are already correct because it's based on economy, right? And we think US urgency to save their economic right now is not that urgent. E.g., that war in China and then win. Secondly, economic condition in US also stable, corporation like Tesla whatsoever. Also, there is to support them, right? We believe urgency to save the world and security is higher. Not that war is already happened. Polarization of power in this world is already happened and more extreme. Not that US-Israel war, that Ministry of USA killed them in the Rudal, for example, that will launch to the Palestine, for example. It enforced global sentiment even higher towards how US conduct is evil and legitimately bad, for example. Therefore, Western allies start to crack, for example, maybe how Ireland whatsoever, leaning to Palestine. Middle East country, sure, like Iran, Syria hate US, right? Even Iran give bomb to Israel and whatsoever, and Israel give bomb to Iran too. Southeast Asia countries like Indonesia and other, 100+ countries support Palestine, for example. This is harmful because you never know the amount of hatred that can make them impose threat to the US and Israel as a vice versa. And secondly, Iran is not the one that has the nuclear, and the probability of World War III is already in the very first place is feasible, ladies and gentlemen. So as US, so actually we need to stop Iran to actually posing a threat towards the world to develop their nuclear. Opening debate is deadlock in talking whether Iran will care and get harmed by economic or nuclear stop sanction. We think never give the urgency why economic should be implemented if war will not happen by this nuclear development, right? And OG say nuclear is dangerous without give an explanation of how hard is actually nuclear is dangerous other than explaining like granite and whatsoever. So engaging with differentiate thing. OG basically overgeneralized that all of the scary and bomb made in Iran by this nuclear weapon and whatsoever. We prove this big of burden by explaining the initiate intention is harmful in the very first place. So you need to erase this. OG benefit implies when Iran want to accept economic sanction, right? The economic offerings from US, for example, when firstly, for far too long, US is aggressive to Iran, and secondly, when in the past, US broke Iran trust, for example. We explain, now Iran has no choice. This is the momentum for US to sincerely give help, and when the president is not Trump. Okay. Going to OO identity is quite questionable, right? Firstly, why do you need to give economic sanctions? And secondly, why then economic will make them realize whatever their wrongdoing that you never explain? Their main point is that they want to sanction Iran economically by not buying iron oil or whatnot to make iron powerless, so they won't develop nuclear, or so to reach whatever their benefit. But you say that Iran still have China and Russia to cooperate, trading and whatnot, so at best your harm is neutralized. Here, in order for you to feel the harm economically, you need them to feel suffer, right? If this Iran still have China and Russia, then how Iran will reflect and stop developing nuclear? B, they say that they want to protect society more, society emotion more and whatnot. But here, you literally make people in hunger by not buying their oil or extremely increasing their price, for example, in global trade. So we question that how under your side of the house you will make Iran will reflect. And the contribution that exclusive under our side clashing with this argument is that we think that global peace more than OG say, right? We explain any incentive to develop nuclear, it's harmful. Like we crystallize the harm to World War III, for example. So JCPOA is very crucial. We also prove more likelihood on how Iran want to accept because their condition like president fall and whatnot. Second attack that they launched to us, that the first thing they say that JCPOA make Iran crazy and worsen the political tension between US and Iran. But then they say Iran nuclear is completely fine. They don't have any power to create a war, and they explain there is UN and whatnot. Firstly, we think that is clashing this argument, right? If you think that's that Iran don't have power and that Iran will not go crazy because of this thing, then this UN and whatnot is already exists under our side. Under our side, we prove to you that UN is actually not enough. We need to make this Iran specifically stop their nuclear because they are desperate and we need to stop this to stop global tension and whatnot. And this is not responded. So at least we will this.
Thank you. Finally, Obwip.
Trigger warning, just like the others. I don't need to tell you. The moment closing government said that the USA doesn't have anything to lose, they already lose to this debate. Why? Because basically they do. They have a lot to lose in the end of the day, right? Because frankly, even if that you're trying to vilify the Iran or maybe the Middle East country as bad as you conspire them to be, in the end of the day, they're still a country. There will be a lot of economical aspect that need to be done in the very first place, right? So I don't think that JCPOA is working at the end of the day, right? Because JCPOA, by the time of if you are trying to reinstate it, it's just basically a mechanism for the USA government and anything that and any countries that involve it within it as the quote unquote their satisfaction mechanism towards their ego and whatsoever it is, right? Now, coming to my response to the OG, all of the case from the opening government is basically typical Americans argument in which this is out of this debate. A, the savior complex from USA is basically the reason why they act like they are right now. B, to prolong their savior complex, they create tons of conspiracy. So even if OG trying to say that, oh, US will be blamed due to the conspiracy, etc., like you're washing your hands from the people's blood. Hence, if you're saying that we will restore our image, you need to do a more realistic effort. For example, support support Palestine's independence, stop sponsoring Zionists with the war equipment, etc. Instead, this JCPOA did nothing other than enabling your evilish behavior further. It is a zero-sum game on the opening government side of the house. See, Trump's policy was established because firstly, he is a businessman. Secondly, he wants to proliferate the USA economy. You cannot selectively vilify Trump because admitted the USA economy was developed during his presidency. You should take a little bit of a flashback during George Bush era if you want to vilify USA government. Take a look when at that type of era, maybe like the most of the U.S. Army are being deployed or are being sent to the Middle East, and they just basically occupy the land for nothing, right? Trump's policy to take this JCPOA is also benefit for the people because now the army are coming home. If you really care about the vast majority, you also need to believe that this army, this life are matter, not your pawns in the end of the day. And next point, as Andre said, Iran will not that dumb to launch the nuclear. Compare Iran's power to the USA. They are less than the superpower country themselves. Even if on the worst case scenario that someday Iran launch it, let's just take the bullet, for example. I think it falls under three reasons. A, Iran have had enough with the USA and their occupation in the Middle East. B, it will be an only possibility where even the USA, it is the USA initiative, so they will have something to do. For example, like Al-Qaeda in the end of the day, right? So, and the third one, USA love war so much. They will do anything to maintain their hegemony and sustain their rivalry with Russia and China. So, even if you're trying to assume that, oh, by this JCPOA, by the end of the time, Russia, China, and the USA will do at the very least, they will do a collaboration whatsoever it is, right? No, I think this is no. Because in the end of the day, they are still rival at heart. They are still trying to make sure that they can maintain their hegemony. They can be quote unquote as capitalistic as possible. They can take profit as much as possible. Proud to be CEO. Now, coming to my argument, Andre has already told you so many things. Why at the end of the day, the JCPOA reinstate will not work, or maybe worse at the end of the day. So it's already game theory at the very first place. What is Iran's threat to the global world is a forcible attack and retaliation. So power of nukes versus, so it's a debate between powers of nukes versus economy. Nukes at the end of the day, if you're trying to say that, oh, the damage is much more bigger, it's much more visible. I think like the economical damage is much more bigger and much more visible at the end of the day, right? Because firstly, how the F you would get your supply, how would you get your food or whatsoever it is, if there is no economical will working at their country, right? So I don't think this debate should fall under the government's bans, because basically, if you're trying to say that US is that good, I don't think they are at the end of the day. I think they're basically just want to make sure that oh, we are prolong our angelic image and whatsoever it is, because now Iran is bad, all the Middle East country is bad, and I think it has something to do with the religion itself, I guess. So because this is the reason that US is trying to prevent, quote unquote prevent. I don't think the prevent is even important here, because they prevent nothing at the end of the day, right? They prevent something to come in which they made it by themselves. So they prevent their own action. Do you think it's rational? I don't think so. That is why the JCPOA shouldn't be reinstated in the end of the day, right? Now, the economic sanction. Andre has told you many times that the economic sanction will already work, because at the end of the day, they still need to trade. They still need to do the whole thing, collaboration with the other country, right? If you're trying to say that, oh, because Trump policies now, this country is this Iran country, it can do the nuclear development and whatsoever it is, right? It is needed in the end of the day, right? So if you're trying to say that, the nuclear development is so bad, I think you should take a look on yourself. Why, at the end of the day, you are sponsoring Zionists with the Lockheed Martin product at the end of the day. You cannot even explain it. Therefore, you're biased toward yourself. If you're trying to tell the whole world that the vast majority is the principle in this debate, I think that the vast majority is not only within your country. The vast majority, exactly because you are a superpower country, exactly because all of the country now is looking at you, you should take into account that every lives matter. Every life, even in the iron citizenship is matter in this debate, right? So by this, I think economical sanction, we think as the closing opposition, economical sanction is much better rather than reinstate the JCPOA, exactly because when you're implementing the economical sanction, the whole collaboration and the proxies and also the take sides on anything beyond that and all that jazz will be more likely to happen rather than just to JCPOA, in which it is very much political and only affect the small amount of people rather than the economical sanction. Proud to be CO.
Great, thank you everyone for the debate. Cross floor, shake hands. Wait for the announcement back at UTCC as the judges will deliberate.